Hello, Janesville. Welcome back to Park Place Views, the monthly program that aims to keep Janesville residents informed by highlighting the people, places, and partners of the City of Janesville. As always, this program is proudly brought to you by the City of Janesville and JATV Media Services. I'm Peyton Walz, your host and the Communications Intern in the City Manager's Office. Today, we have a special episode of Park Place Views.
I have two pivotal figures here from City Hall to discuss their hardworking efforts regarding the tornado that devastatingly hit the south side of Janesville this past month. Well, without further ado, let me introduce to you my two guests, Kevin Lahner, who is the Janesville City Manager, and Kelly Bedessem, who is our Housing Director, but she serves dual roles as our Emergencies Operation Control Center Supervisor in the case of an emergency such as this one. These two people play pivotal roles and wear many hats within our Emergencies Operations team.
Before we dive in, I want to express my admiration of how both of you have handled this challenging situation. As a newcomer to City Hall myself, I'm eager to learn more about both of your roles and how the different departments collaborate together in the case of a crisis. So, Kevin, the first question is for you. Would you please just like to start by introducing yourself and explain your role as the city manager in and out of a crisis situation?
You know, in an emergency like this, it's really the facilitation of resources. And we have, what is really great to know is that we have an emergency operations plan that we practice on a regular basis. And so we have a lot of folks that step outside of their normal jobs and step into what's known as the Emergency Operations Center whenever there is a crisis. In this particular crisis, actually, when it hit, I was out of town. I was in Nashville, Tennessee. I was 9 hours away. And I was briefed on it at about 10:30 that evening and got the scope of the crisis. And it was very reassuring to me as a city manager to know that folks like Kelly and others were in our Emergency Operations Center immediately responding and marshaling the resources for the event. So in that sense, things were handled very, very well. And then as it goes on, as the Emergency Operations Center goes on, really, I'm actually just a tool when it comes to what Kelly does. We help Kelly gets what she needs, and then she deploys it and works with a variety of people to make those things happen.
Excellent. Yeah, so then, Kelly, can you introduce yourself and explain what the EOC Supervisor's duties include?
Sure. So my name is Kelly Bedessem. I'm the Housing Services Director in my real life, but when we have an emergency or a crisis, then I act as the EOC Emergency Operations Center Supervisor. My role there, like Kevin alluded to, is just to make sure that we support the mission of whatever's occurring outside of those four walls of City Hall. So it's getting all of the things that they may need in the field, making sure that we're prepared and we're working as a team to help support that team out there.
Mm-hmm. So you said you do serve dual roles, and in the case of an emergency, you are the supervisor of that emergency operations team. So how do you balance those two roles when there is an emergency?
Well, I'd like to say I do it really well. It's hard. It's hard when you're directing an entire division and then also this event. I worked a lot of hours last week to make sure that I was keeping up with everything, and then I rely upon my director in order to help facilitate things that need to go on in housing. So I came back to, a lot of things waiting on my to-do list.
Yep.
We'll get it done.
Yeah. And then Kevin, how does your role connect to the EOC supervisor?
Yeah, so as the emergency develops, there's different teams that do different things. And so essentially I'm a part of a group that's called the policy team. And so like if there is a big decision to be made about what we do or don't do, there's a discussion amongst many, and we kind of set a route and then we go down that lane. And so like in this particular emergency, a good example is, where do we concentrate our efforts of tree debris removal? Like, when did we get out there? What area did we define? How did it happen? Like all of those things are very big decisions. And I'm just another voice in the room that can help facilitate how to get things. Sometimes a person like myself will have certain connections where we can make certain calls, So like if we need state resources, I can get the governor on the phone if we need him. But there are just different folks that have different skill sets. They all bring it to the table and they discuss, and then we move forward.
Right. Yeah. How do you decide which one of those things needs to happen first? How do you choose priority?
Just whatever Kelly tells me. No, I mean, it's really a reaction to what's happening on the ground. And so there's a process that happens within an emergency operations center where you define a mission, you define a time frame in which that mission gets accomplished, and then you come back and you discuss what happened and then set the path forward. And so, like, really in that role, I'm just another piece of that puzzle.
Well, it sounds like, Kelly, you're excellent at what you do, and I can imagine that comes with a lot of pressure to have all these people relying on you. So how do you handle the pressure?
So my first job out of college was in Colorado Springs Police Department dispatching. So I'm kind of used to that pace and that amount of pressure. And so I think the most important part is that we come together as a team.
Right.
No one individual is having to do anything on their own, and we all support one another. I think going back to what Kevin said is the training. You know, I think we just, as long as we continue to train and we continue to work together, we build those relationships prior to coming into an emergency situation. I think that's one of the most important parts.
Right. And then what's something that you might avoid the next time something happens?
I don't know if it's avoid, but I think, obviously after any kind of event, we do an after-action review to make sure that everything that we did was the best that we could do it.
Yeah.
So I think there are certainly opportunities for us to improve as we go through that. And that's not just me, that's everyone who is in the EOC would have the opportunity to provide suggestions to do it better next time.
Yeah, everything is a learning opportunity for sure. So then, Kevin, my next question is for you, just to keep things lighthearted. What is something that you feel that your department did well in this emergency?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing I think that we did that was very, very good was our information output to the community. Within the Emergency Operations Center, we have a team that's dedicated to that, and there were several great folks that were a part of that got word out very quickly about what we were doing. To make sure that people were prepared and ready and were just knowledgeable about what was going on. So that's something that I'm really proud of. And then the other thing is that I'm just really proud of the team that stepped up when I was gone. So that is really, really great to see. It was an out-of-body experience for me not to be here when things were happening, but I had a lot of confidence in the folks that were here.
So that was within your department, something you've noticed that went really well was just the information and the communication that was sent out by that team. What is something that you think other departments did exceptionally well during this crisis?
I think that there's just been a number of things. The biggest thing was opening up the roads right away. I mean, just the operations division of our public works has been amazing, absolutely amazing. Putting in tons of hours to get trees removed, primarily trees removed from people's yards and in the streets and everywhere else. Just the amount of tree damage in the city is just huge over this whole thing. And then obviously the public safety folks. I mean, there was a rescue that happened when the roads were closed, and so they were able to evacuate some people safely after a house was hit very hard by a tornado, and the entire group in general. And I think that it just goes, I have to give a lot of credit to Kelly and how everything happened because things were running incredibly smoothly during the entire operation.
And then Kelly.
It's always about those relationships. And so it's about building those relationships before we're in crisis. Once we get into crisis, emotions are high. And so it's really about building those prior to that. And then my role in the EOC is really just to support everyone. So that's my goal, is to make sure that everyone is heard, everyone is comfortable. We're all allowed to express what we're thinking and feeling during that time. And then the communication piece is another really important part, that we're making sure that we communicate among one another so that we all know what's going on at the same time.
Right. It feels like a lot of trust is required with that process, because if the different departments can't trust each other, then the whole thing will fall apart. But it seems like that was handled really well in this situation.
I think that's the one thing that I would say about the city of Janesville is we do have, we have a really tight team. and when we hit crisis, we do what needs to be done for the residents of the community.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Our community really came together, and it was incredible to see all the volunteers giving their time, neighbors lending a hand to help one another. This community thrives off of its generosity, and it's great to see in tragedy our town can emerge with excellence. What are just a few things the people of Janesville can do to prepare themselves the next time an inevitable emergency like this were to take place?
I mean, I think that there's a lot of things that you can do. Obviously, if you have an emergency kit, like keep that ready to go. Pay attention to the weather warnings. You know, we kind of sometimes in the busy Wisconsin weather, we get immune to them. We don't necessarily pay attention to them. And these storms can form very quickly. And so when you hear the sirens, when you see the stuff on your phone, go in the basement. There was a story where one of the houses where the roof was completely taken off, a woman drove into the garage. As the garage door was open, the roof came off her house, and her kids happened to be in the part of the house that the roof stayed on, and they were able to get into a basement in that moment. But that was just an example of how important it is to pay attention to those weather warnings.
Yeah, and to be prepared for that. And it is hard because I feel like we always get all these flood warnings and severe thunderstorm warnings, and there's always a tornado watch or warning this time of year. So it's easy to just brush it off and be like, it's fine. But yeah, something like this can really open our eyes to how real these, storms can be.
Exactly.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you both so much for joining me on this special episode of Park Place. You have both handled the pressure of helping our community with grace, and it's obvious you both are very great at what you do. And before we wrap things up, I just want to thank our viewers and our residents for tuning in today and for all you do to help make the Janesville community a supportive and inclusive environment. For Park Place Views and the City of Janesville, I'm Peyton Walz. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.